At this time, I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For everyone here this evening, we have an agenda before us. We'll move to approval of that agenda, which is agenda item number 2. Are there any corrections or changes to the agenda?
Your Honor, members of City Council, staff, under the recommendation that was updated, is recommending to remove number 5. We have introduction to an ordinance, but we inserted the wrong ordinance in there for the background, so we removed it, and we'll be doing that next meeting.
Any other recommendations for additions or deletions or changes to the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by
Larry.
Larry to approve. Discussion. Now we'll move to a vote. Okay, that motion passes. Move that to agenda item number 3. Agenda item number 3 is consider the minutes of the last regular council meeting that was held on November 10th. The council does have those minutes. Are there any corrections?
I'll move the minutes. I'll second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by John, to approve as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is a public hearing to consider the rezoning request at 406 Airport Road from a R1 single-family resident district to a I1 limited industry district. So we will conduct this public hearing, and then following the public hearing, we will consider the ordinance that would allow the rezoning. So to conduct this public hearing, I'll call on Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The property is located just south of Trunk Highway 19, is located just to the north. Williams Brothers Pipeline, the railroad tracks, County Road 7, and the property that we're discussing is this one, the third property in or south of the railroad tracks on the west side of County Road 7. The property had previously been used as a automotive repair shop, contractor shop, and you can see that it's a fairly significant size property. And the value of the property, as listed in our from our assessor, is about $135,000, I believe. And if you want to correct me on stuff like that, you can certainly aware or can do that. But anyway, the area is currently zoned residential, and for the property owner to sell it for residential property at anything close to that rate probably isn't going to happen. So the owner had initiated a process of a conditional use for the use of that property, and what we did discuss was, yes, that could be done, but the conditional use could only be used, continued for the use that it currently was listed for, and that is for automotive repair or real similar use. In this case, at the Planning Commission, the owner brought up the fact that he had intent to sell it for a different type of use, and that would be for contractors, warehousing, or storage, and so it might not be the appropriate method for approval as a conditional use. So instead, during the discussion, it was decided to go forward as a recommendation for a rezoning from single-family residential to light industrial I-1. All of the other uses are residential in the neighborhood, but because of its size and proximity to the railroad and really the proposed use was going to be, in our opinion, at least as staff, a better use than what currently existed. So if we want to take a look at the, let me see if I can do this. Can I go to, okay. Currently, this is the zoning map, and it shows then this area is single-family residential. The property just across the street is as heavy industrial, or I-2, and as well as across the railroad tracks. And so what we would, I'm going to try to get to the next one. Okay. This shows the proposed zoning then to change to light industrial that would include this type of contractors, warehousing and office space. You can see then that it is a zone right in the kind of the middle of the R1 zoning. But our discussion also then with the, at the Planning Commission was, yes, it is a spot zoning, but normally if these properties would come up for sale or for a different use or would, you know, have damage done to them, burned down or whatever, would it really be the best place for single-family residential? As a matter of fact, this property here isn't large enough currently for a single-family residential lot. The property just to the south of them is a church facility, and they're in a single-family residential neighborhood because they can be in any district. So the recommendation at this hearing is to recommend from the staff and Planning Commission to rezone it to light industrial at this time, with kind of the intent that as the area develops or redevelops in the future, that's probably going to be the direction that might take. It could stay single-family residential until it wasn't our intent to force any changes of other zoning. So I think I'll let it stop there. And if you have any questions from the applicant, he's in the audience, or from anyone else during the hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Glenn. We'll open it up as part of the public hearing for questions, comments, first from the council. Any input as part of the public hearing from the council?
Well, I got a couple of questions. All the way to the bottom of that screen, is that where that dryer company is?
Right along the bike path,
Yeah.
is what he's talking about. That would be on the south side of the river.
On the south side of the river?
Yep. Is that shown on there?
No,
Okay.
no.
So then that blue line on the bottom, is that about where the river is then, huh? So isn't there a fur buying place up in there? That's all R1, correct?
This is all R1. These are all single-family residential lots and houses, with this one being the church, and the river is right here, and this is County Road 7.
So the two property owners to the north were notified?
Yes, all the adjacent property
Yeah.
owners.
And no response from them?
They might be here tonight. There wasn't at the Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or input from the council as part of the public hearing? John?
Glenn, is there any other downside or whatever to being an I-2 that you can think of?
And not in being an I-1.
Okay,
In an
I-1.
I-2, there might be
Okay,
some
I-2 is the
downside.
crossroad. This is an
That's
I-1.
correct, this
Okay,
is
that's
I-1.
right. Sorry. But, so nothing really, just limiting it to an I-1.
Correct.
The other question, up where it says proposed, is that agriculture?
Uh,
On that upper left?
No, I think this was the proposal just for
No, but-
what you see here on the map. That is
understand
I-2 now.
But
That's
that-
Williams Brothers.
That should
Oh,
say
that's Williamsburg.
existing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the proposed is
Yeah.
this is the proposed overhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
Williams
member
is
of
I
the,
two.
any member of the
The
audience?
Williams is I2.
You wish to speak? Okay. Any other member of the audience wish to speak as part of the public hearing? Any other input that the council has? If not, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by John, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Larry, discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll now consider the ordinance that would allow the rezoning from the R1 Single Family Resident District to the I1 Limited Industry. Are there any questions about the ordinance as it has been proposed?
I'll move the ordinance.
Motion by Larry, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 5. Agenda item number 5 is also a public hearing, or this is the one that was removed from the agenda. So we'll move then to agenda item number 6. This is a public hearing to consider the request of Independent School District 413 for the variance request. So to conduct this public hearing, and once again, we'll follow the same procedure. We'll conduct the public hearing, receive any input, questions, then we'll close the public hearing, and then we'll consider the action. So to conduct the public hearing, I'll call on Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This request came from the school district specifically to place I'll call it a temporary classroom located by Parkside School. This is Parkside School, and this is the proposed location of the temporary classroom facility. I believe the intent of the facility is to provide 2 separate classroom areas within it's what we classify as kind of a double-wide manufactured home. Pre-made, it's been already pre-approved by the building facility and stamped as meeting all the codes that we require. A couple of other things that need to be done, of course, is utilities to the facility, power, and a foundation system that it would be placed upon. And the only item that we have in our ordinance that they have to comply with it is a variation to what is currently there is the exterior siding. The exterior siding of the facility is hardboard siding, which I believe is a class 4, and it needs to have certain amounts of class 1, 2, or 3 finishes. At the Planning Commission, where this was reviewed, there was a discussion concerning requiring it to meet that standard. And there was a concern that we would be maybe placing what we have passed and have allowed in the past as being different for a public entity than a private entity. But in that discussion, it also came up with, I'll give you the example that was used. Skews Jewelry was the one that was used, where the Planning Commission and ultimately they were required to have those finishes. But the difference between the two is that's a permanent structure. It was intended to be a permanent structure at the time, and that's how the review is done. In this case, the intent was for this to be a temporary structure. And so the feeling is that there is a difference between the requirements or the allowances that the city would make, or at least the Planning Commission would recommend for a permanent structure or temporary one. In this case, the discussion is that this structure would be there for a period of up to 2 years, and should then there be that allowance for temporary use of it as it currently exists or being changed. So the Planning Commission, you can see what their recommendation was approval for the 2-year period of time, and there's some other items for discussion in there, but that's how it's coming forward to you for recommendation from the Planning Commission and from staff for approval. Bruce Lamprecht is here from the school district to address any other questions that you might have for that.
Okay, so we'll open up for input. As part of the public hearing, we'll look first to the council,
I
and then Craig, and then David.
attended the Planning Commission meeting, and I think some of the comments that were brought up was that one is they didn't want it to be that a government entity had preferential treatment over a private company. We should treat a government entity like the school district the same way we would a private company, and not give them preferential treatment. And you can see that the vote was fairly split on this, and there was confusion as to whether one of the members could even vote, and there was one member that wasn't even present. So it's not a strong recommendation from the Planning Commission on this matter. We need to remember that this structure might remain more than 2 years if the referendum doesn't pass. This is assuming that a referendum will pass. I think if you show the pictures, if you scroll down to see the pictures a second.
Nope, can you do it, Ben, or?
Oh, I
Go-
forgot you can do it.
If I can. That's the location, that it would be in this front courtyard area located right in this area here. And the reason for that, let me expand on that a little bit. The location we thought would be better placed in the backyard, maybe not so much in the front eye. Well, when we took a look at that thought, there's 8 or 9 single-family residential homes in the backyard. So in the front, there's public space, but not the space right in front of someone's backyard. The other discussion we had on that was for the purpose of construction, this would be the location that would be preferential for the feeding of power. And if in fact the new additions were approved, the locations of the new additions would be in the area that we recommended that the temporary be. So if you were going to do the improvements in the back, you certainly wouldn't want the temporary structure to be located in the way of what you were doing. So with that discussion, yes, this seemed like the best location for a short term. Then, okay, I'm maybe moving the wrong way here. This is the layout or the condition, the looks, the hardboard siding. This is what we're discussing tonight. It's the siding of this unit. Okay, so that was kind of the discussion. Is in the recommendation number 5. The variance adjustment expires at the end of 2017. The comment is, what happens then? Well, it's either not going to be there, or they have to come back to council for another approval for either a new variance. I would expect it to be a new variance by that time, or denial at that time. So we're thinking that in this 2-year period of time, there's an opportunity for at least 2 votes. Is that true? I'm not familiar with the process and separation of timing. Ben?
And then, if you could, Glenn, another option is that if they simply choose to comply with the ordinance by making changes to the facility, which I don't know if you discussed that or not, but they very well
Yes, I
could
did.
meet the requirements, then they wouldn't need any extension. In fact,
No.
the city could even force the issue at that time, that they were given time to make the improvements and just deal with it then.
Right, there was discussion at the planning commission meeting concerning, would that break the bank, to re-side this or to change the siding at this time? And it certainly wasn't a unanimous agreement, but the idea is why spend the extra money of the district to make it look good if it's just going to go away after 2 years or less? So that's the discussion.
At this point, we didn't even know the cost of complying. We don't, they'd have to put like a stucco or something on it or
Right.
somehow cover it. I think some other comments were, if you look at the picture, and there's two pictures, and one of the planning commission members made the comment that he had heard from members of the community that there was concern that it almost looks like they have a real ugly building being put there by the school, and by having an ugly building placed there, it would encourage voters to vote in favor of the referendum. And do you recall that at the meeting?
Oh,
The
sure.
comment?
That's been a comment by the public, but it's something that we didn't address the cost of it. It is a used structure. It is what it is kind of thing, that it complies with our building code, and the only thing it didn't comply with was that exterior finish.
Anyway, that was a comment that he'd heard, that, placing an ugly building there would encourage people to vote in favor of a referendum. Whether there's truth to that or not, I'm not saying, but I mean, that comment was made. Another comment, I talked to you after the meeting, and I mentioned the fact that, well, maybe just even painting it would help, where it would blend in more with the present building and wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb. Maybe just requiring some paint would help improve the view, because it is going to have a different look to it than the existing building, and it is going to stand out. And if you did something even like painting, it wouldn't cost that much, and wouldn't be such an eyesore to the community. Anyway, those were the comments that I heard at the Planning Commission meeting.
Bruce, you had your hand up before, but I don't know if you want to wait until we get to the public part, or if you wanted to react now. So otherwise, Greg, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Glenn, I've got just a question on, and it's on item 5 again. Would it make more sense to put that at the end of the school year instead of at the end of the calendar year? I mean, 2 years seems like, even if everything goes good, the referendum passes, that's kind of putting it in. So if we approve it, I'd rather approve it through that 16-17 school year than drop it off at the end of December. And if they got to reside, January's not a great time to do that. That's just an observation that I would. Is there a reason that it's 2 years? Do we have a limit on? I mean, variance is a variance, and we can grant it for whatever length, and we can put whatever conditions on that variance we see fit. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Two questions. One for Bruce. If the artist's sketch is correct, you're going to have to knock out some trees to accommodate these buildings. Is that correct?
Bruce, I'd ask you then to come forward and use the microphone.
My name is Bruce Lamprecht. I'm Director of Business Services for the school district. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and city council members for allowing me to speak. Your question, Mr. Sturrock, was requires remove some trees? No.
Okay, that's just an artist's rendering. Okay, well, thank you for that. I guess that's all I have for you at the moment, but thank you. Second question, Glenn, I'm remembering from my planning commission days, for variance, we had to meet an undue hardship test, and I see in the supporting language here it refers to, quotes, practical difficulties, a softer threshold. So what would be the practical difficulties that would justify us granting the variance?
The practical difficulties are for the actual siding itself.
Pardon me?
That's the only one. Just the siding replacement or adjustment is the only practical difficulties that we see.
And then the question which perhaps Mr. Miracle raised is how practically difficult would it be to improve the appearance or the finish for those 2 years?
All right, after the planning commission meeting that we had, well, almost a week ago, I did do a little research in regards to what the cost would be to be able to meet the standards of the ordinance as far as the outer appearance. And there's really two options at this point in time. One is for a pre-finished architectural metal panels without exposed fasteners. You can't have exposed fasteners. That estimated construction cost is $15,500 to $18,000. That's one option. The second option would be a cement-based architectural panels and trim. Estimated construction cost $20,000 to $22,500. The cost of this unit to the school district is $48,000.
That sounds like a practical difficulty to me. Thank you.
I guess Glenn answered the one part of it, but just for clarification on what we're really talking about, you're saying the school district has every right, whatever, to install this building, and here the only discussion we're talking about is the exterior finish.
That is
That's
correct.
Okay, thank you.
I know the other question that has come up is, and just for the record, I think we'll answer this, but when the fire occurred at the university, the very similar units were installed at the university. But at that time, the ordinance regarding the exterior material wasn't in place.
No, that's correct.
So that's why that wasn't an issue then. Okay, Craig and then John.
No, just pointing out that Elliot's
Elliot.
got a question.
I can probably answer the question about practical difficulties. This is a temporary. Thank you, Mayor Council. Practical difficulties here is that building, this is not a real building. This is a pre-manufactured unit, which is done to a little bit different code, and it is a unit. So any change to this unit is much more than a change to the normal building. The difference between this thing as a unit and if it were a normal stick build or something like that, other type of building.
John?
Just curiosity, any fire protection, sprinkler system or anything in this, or how did?
This thing doesn't require sprinklers, but it does have fire alarms.
Okay.
I guess I have a question for Glenn and Eliad. Suppose it wasn't a temporary request, it was a permanent. Would the city be in favor of granting the variance then, or would you approach it differently? I mean, I'm thinking in the future, as far as the planning commission, is this a situation where even if it were permanent, the city would propose that we agree to the variance, or would you be opposed to it?
That's up to the
I'm just
the
wondering
council.
what approach would
Okay,
you be taking?
for instance, if they want to make that permanent today,
Right.
they could make that permanent today. It meets the codes. You wouldn't change anything different there, Ilya, would you? No.
Otherwise, no.
Code-wise, no. The exterior is the only thing that we would address. So the setbacks are adequate, the location is okay, and we would allow that to be installed where it is.
What I'm
Proposed
wondering
to be.
about is how much of the recommendation is based upon the fact that it's considered temporary and not permanent?
Well, the
If it were
recommendation
permanent,
for
would
the
you be-
siding is specifically related to the siding only.
Right, but I'm just saying,
Right.
if they came forward and said, we're going to put a permanent thing without meeting the siding requirement, would you be in favor of approving that, or are you
No.
only in favor of it because it's a temporary thing?
No, our recommendation is based upon only the siding.
Right, and you're saying as long as it's only for a few years.
And we can put that requirement on there because it is a temporary, and we're recommending that it be allowed temporarily with the existing siding. Okay,
But you're not recommending it permanently.
correct.
And at this point, we don't know if it's temporary or permanent because we don't know if the referendum will pass or not.
That's right. Then that's why we're making sure that our recommendation is a temporary recommendation.
So we'll move then Craig and then Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hands up.
And I kind of, and Glenn, I don't want to answer your question for you, but I can speak for what's in my mind. And when I read this, it has a sunset of 17. My feeling would be to make it middle 17, but if it does stay there longer, I mean, absolutely, I think Glenn said it, and it would be in my mind too that it would be made aesthetically different. So I have a question based on that. If we go to a point and we're looking at 2017, and those structures need to stay there, Ilya, is that siding, does it go over what's already here, or do you have to take what's here off and put the other on, or is it the option of the owner?
Are you talking about from the point of the ordinance?
Yeah,
The ordinance is concerned only with what you actually see.
the exterior finish. So they could engineer to go over the top of what's there and not interfere with the structure and just,
Correct.
okay.
But still, as a temporary structure, as a pre-manufactured unit, that has to be evaluated completely differently, separately
Exactly.
from the
Yep.
regular building.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think, and I agree somewhat with Mr. Schaefer, although that hurts sometimes. Anyway, you're talking, Craig, about the 2 years. You have to go to June of 18. June of 18. Of 18, not 17.
Right, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I
Which would be
understand.
the end of that cluster.
Yep.
And I don't know why that we're looking at just a temporary structure to enhance our kids, our children's education. I don't know why we'd spend up to $25,000 just to make it look good. I think the buildings seem that, and just because they're not color-coded or whatever, I don't see any reason for that. I think to park those things there the way they are today, without spending the extra taxpayer dollars, I think we owe that to our city and our school and our county not to spend that money on it. I think what we have there would work just fine.
Other input as part of the public hearing.
Our recommendation is based on all available information, including the temporary nature of the.
Sure. I guess no one's addressed my question about the painting. And how much would it cost to paint it so that it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb? I mean, why isn't that a requirement?
I'll just address that, Mr. Bayerkohler, that we have not gotten a price on what it would cost to paint. And this is just my own opinion. I'm not sure that it sticks out like a sore thumb. That would be in the eye of the beholder. And I guess we could address that once it gets placed to say, wow, it does look like it's out of place and we need to do something as far as painting goes. But I think we should wait until it does get placed to see if in fact with the area, the Parkside building that's there, does it coordinate with what's already there? And I think it's going to.
The other point to be made, though, is paint would not bring it into compliance.
No.
Still the same material.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, in this particular zoning district, the city does not regulate colors of structures. Is that right, Ilya?
Colors are not regulated anywhere.
Just in the downtown
Except
heritage
downtown.
district.
Downtown,
Right.
yeah. It's only the material itself which is regulated.
Right.
Part of the reason for the requirement that we have a certain type of siding is that so it doesn't devalue the neighbor's property, and so it fits in. So even though painting does not change the quality, the quality of the materials, it makes it look more pleasing. And like I say, that's part of the reason for the ordinance in the first place, is so that the neighborhoods look decent and don't look run down. And so that's the reason for the painting. It's not to bring it into compliance, but more so to make it more pleasing for people to look at and not such an eyesore. And I don't know, we'd have to see what it looks like, but certainly, like I said, comments have been made that it's meant to stick out like a sore thumb, and I don't know if that's the case or not, but if it does, that's not something we want in our community, for people to drive by our school and see something that looks kind of run down and in need of repair.
Mr. Mayor, I'd suggest that at that point in time, that's probably a conversation that should be taken to the school board and probably not to the city council.
Other input as part of the public hearing? David? Motion by David to close the public hearing. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Larry. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. The motion does pass. We'll now consider the variance request.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to move the variance request as printed, except for item number 5, that the variance adjustment permit expires at the end of June 1st of 2018, which would be the end of the school year. Bruce, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
June 1, 2018 is what you
Correct.
said? Is there,
Is it better, if I could ask, Mr. Lamprecht, is it better June 1 or June 30 for your purposes, or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter. School will be out
Leave it be.
June 1st.
okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded. Motion by Larry, seconded by Craig. Now discussion.
This is, to me anyway, is a very difficult issue, because I don't like wasting taxpayer money, but I also want fairness and fair treatment for everyone that goes before the planning commission, before the city council, and that whether it's a government entity or a private company, they should be treated the same. And certainly there's uncertainty regarding how permanent a structure this will be. It depends on referendums and whether they have the money. And sometimes with I can see people saying, well, go ahead and add classrooms here, but as I understand, the referendum would cover all other types of improvements in the school district, and not just these buildings here. So even though some people might favor adding to Parkside for elementary classrooms, they may not favor other parts of the project, and that could possibly affect the outcome. And so, like I say, this is a difficult issue for me, and it's hard to know what to do. Like I said, I want equal treatment for all the individuals and entities that come before the city council and the planning commission. At the same time, I don't want to see taxpayer or private company money wasted unnecessarily. Whether it's a private company or a government entity, we shouldn't be wasting money if we don't have to.
Okay, John, and then Craig, and then Larry.
I guess just comments that I think looking at this from perhaps the perspective of the school board, one, they've classified it as temporary classroom. I would suspect that this is not a favored manner in any way to have a classroom by anyone in the school district, that being separated, having a classroom actually separated from a major school. So I think in my feeling, the intent of this is that it is very much a temporary. The plan is certainly not to leave it there and to move on with other options as those options develop more and move on, buys them a little bit of time to get there. So I guess I would be voting in favor of this thing, realizing that it is actually a temporary, and I think that's the kind of the gut feeling of the entire school district.
Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and I agree with what John says. I think that, I would put myself in a position if we were looking at this with any of our businesses or any other constituent within the community, faced with a short-term issue, to take something like this that really doesn't have anything to do with the code other than that outside appearance. And I think that our staff have made that pretty clear, that it's not a structural piece, it's not a safety piece, it's about appearance, and it's not permanent. I think it's appropriate then to do it with a variance. If it was something permanent, I would say that they should be given a time frame and brought into compliance, which this does. It gives them till the 1st of June of 2018. If the building's still there, there's going to have to be adjustments made to deal with it, or we get to talk about it and vote on it again. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that you call the question.
Question's been called, so Jane will do this as a voice vote. So the vote now would be on to call the question, and then if that passes, then we'll vote on the main motion. So all in favor of the question being called, say.
Just a question, point of order, not trying to remember the rules of order. Do you need a second on that call a question?
No.
No, okay.
So all in favor of the question being called, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The motion does pass. We'll move then on to the main motion, that is to allow which is listed as motion number 2, granting the variance request with the 5 conditions.
June
June 1st, 2018.
And it's been updated.
All right,
Yes,
sorry.
it has been.
So we will move to a vote.
Uh,
No discussion. This question been called.
What's that?
It's not getting an option to vote. Oh, you did? Got my vote, right, Gene? Just waiting for the mayor.
And I would,
So
what I was going to do,
first off, the motion does pass. Glenn, you
what I
have
was going to do is I would have favored the motion if, in fact, there'd been a hard deadline here of June 1st that the school district would comply at that time. My concern is that June 1st, 2018, if it rolls around and it's not done, then another extension, a temporary extension will be done. And like I said, if the debate had not been cut off, I would have made that point and I could have supported this, but if indeed it is a temporary thing, that's one thing, but sometimes what's temporary ends up being permanent.
And I agree with that, but I think it's important that as a council, we remember that we're here to debate issues that are affected by the council. The issues that you bring up are issues that are with a referendum that affect an elected board or body that is not the city council. That's my issue. We've brought it up, talked about it 3 times. Redundancy is no longer a discussion when it's not our issue.
So I'm going to move us then to agenda item number 7, since that motion did pass. So agenda item number 7. And agenda item number 7 is the consent agenda. I'll bring the items up on the consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening, consider the application for on-sale intoxicating liquor license for the American Legion Post 113. Recommend the resolution for the contract between the patrol, police accredited training online in the city of Marshall, and having Rob Bian serve as the administrator for the contract. Consider the resolution decertifying the tax increment financing District 2-3. Consider the authorization to approve the towing and storage agreement between the City of Marshall and Southwest Towing and Recovering, adopting a 2015 Fire Relief Association contribution resolution, amending the bylaws, consideration of the general obligation bond proceeds grant agreement, the end grant for the Southwest Minnesota Amateur Sports Center project in Marshall, Consider a resolution for the interfund loan from the TIF Marshall Hotel project, and then finally to consider the approval of the bills and the project maintenance. So is there any item on the consent agenda that any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Mr. Mayor, if I'm not a member of the council, but I would like to recommend to remove number 14. We're going to recommend to continue that to the next meeting, so I'd like to recommend you pull that from the discussion or the consent agenda and act on it separately.
Remove agenda item number 14. And are you suggesting that takes, that will be removed and then added for separate action to refer? Okay. So then that'll be moved down. Okay. Any other item that any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Oops, not that one, Jane. The, oh yeah, the interfund loan, I'm sorry.
If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by John, is there a second? Seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. So we'll move then to agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15, consider the resolution for the interfund loan for the TIF Marshall Hotel project. Ben, you have a recommendation for a date specific or just to?
This one's, thank you, Your Honor, members of council. This one's been hanging out there a long time, and it's just kind of an administrative item. I do have a draft now done, so I'm recommending to continue it to the next meeting, and we'll take action at that time.
Is there a motion to continue this agenda item to the next regular council meeting?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Pause just a second. Thank you, Jane, for your quick action and revising that motion and moving, and you got everything done without any delays, so thank you. Agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16 is the ordinance amending the Central Business District permitting the self-storage warehouses as a conditional use permit. The action here would be the introduction of the action and calling for a public hearing. So this, like some other items, could generate a lot of discussion, but the time for that will be at the public hearing. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is just for your information. The request was made by a property owner in the downtown district to allow mini storage operations on the second floor of one of the buildings in the downtown. And the discussion at the Planning Commission will bring this up at the hearing or the second reading of the ordinance. But the issue is type of storage, and it's intended to be done by conditional use permit. So take a look at that over the next couple of weeks, understanding that if you're the property owner and of the building and you're using that building, you can store materials on second floor today. So this would be for rental purposes on second floor. It wouldn't be the use. We also had discussions of what happens if those materials were flammables, or if those materials, if the person just moved out and left their junk on the street that they were storing in there, what would be done with it? So flammables is a thing that we didn't like to be stored there, but it currently is permitted by if you had for instance, a lawnmower location downtown and you had some of that material stored on your second floor. So it was good discussion, but they decided to recommend that we go forward with the process through City Council. That's all I'd say today.
Glenn, any comments from the Planning Commission?
No, I think he said it.
I'll move the ordinance and call for the public hearing.
Motion by Larry, is there a second? Seconded by David. Discussion on the motion.
Also, Glenn, was there any discussion about implications for weight? We've got older buildings and, supports and joists that perhaps have weakened, and I'm guessing we're not talking about industrial scale elevators to move stuff up and down, so it's gonna be what people can reasonably carry. Maybe not an issue, but did that come up in the discussion?
Yes, it did. And that's exactly the discussion about the things coming up and down. For the opposite side is, what happens if you wanted to store, 10 pianos on second floor? Well, you could do that today if you owned the facility. So it's one of those things where we have to understand what the conditional use permit would be for.
I get a question also, Mr. Mayor. So, under the conditional use permit, obviously we put conditions on it as recommended by the Planning Commission. How do we enforce those? How do we enforce the conditions that we put on it then? If these are
refer that to you,
rented,
Dennis.
By inspections?
Yeah.
You're right. You grant the conditions, but we don't have a regular
And we grant them
annual
trust,
or,
yeah.
yes, we don't
Okay.
have an annual inspection. And it's interesting, that question has recently come up on the attorney list serve. I think that the Detroit Lakes attorney asked that same question. How do we guarantee compliance? Is there, and I know St. Cloud does have an inspection, an annual inspection of conditional use permit conditions right now, but
I look at
right now
this.
we don't have one.
And I know we're way ahead on the thing here because we're calling for the public hearing, but as I think about public storage units with access and then coveys, they're typically open to the outside air. Some of them now in the Twin Cities, there are some of the higher elevated thermally or, climate controlled use stores that are inside the building, but you're not affecting somebody else's space. Now we're mixing uses, and somebody unknown to me can affect that space if I'm a secondary tenant. And I just look at this and it raises a lot more questions than I can come up with answers. So I'll stop there.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? Ilya, you have something to add?
I just want to make a comment. Mayor Council, it's conditional use permit, so that's kind of within the ordinance, but it's also the building code is still applicable.
Sure.
So there are quite a few issues that will be resolved based on the building code rather than the ordinance.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. The motion passes. Agenda item number 17. Agenda item number 17, the request of Avera Marshall for a sign permit on South Bruce Street, the right-of-way there. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you go, okay, very good. Yes. The location of the proposed sign would be, I want to make sure I'm on here, would be in this location right here. We had a significant discussion with them about the location of the sign, whether it be on College Drive or on Bruce Street. We have a signal located at this location, and we didn't want it to be, I'll say, competitive with that signal as well. There's a significant amount of utilities, so we also addressed that any damages to the existing utilities would be reimbursed by the applicant. We do recommend approval of this location, including all the conditions that we discussed with the applicant.
Okay. Questions for Glenn?
Glenn, if I'm following this, we're recommending just the sign on Bruce Street, not the one on East College.
This one is for the authorization on the right-of-way of South Bruce Street.
East College, we don't have to act on that.
We do, and we do not have control of the right-of-way.
They are planning to do both of those then.
My understanding is they are. Ilya, any discussions that you've had on
Yes,
the?
they plan to have both of them, but the one on the East College is on their.
That has the issue
Yeah.
here. Thank you.
Okay. That's a good question. question. Any other questions? If not, what is the wishes of the council on this request?
Of approval of the sign permit for the South Bruce Street right-of-way.
Motion by David, is there a second? Seconded by Elaine. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. The motion passes. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18, consider the approval of the 2015 partnership agreement with Marshall Municipal Utilities. Ben, do you want to start with this?
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the City Council. The joint committee who reviews this every year includes representatives from both the Marshall Municipal Utilities as well as the City of Marshall. Did meet on the 17th, went through the agreement, and are recommending unanimously recommending approval of all of the agreements. Kind of on a higher level, just from kind of the public standpoint, is we do have a number of partnerships that the City of Marshall and the utility company, which is a municipal utility with a separate board with authorities. There are a number of agreements and partnerships, cooperations that they do together that we work out. And this mass agreement concept was created prior to my arriving in 2008. So I think it's got quite a bit of history behind it and has worked extremely well. Some of the discussion at the meeting got into a little bit of the background of it, and that there used to be a lot of uncertainty and issues kind of year to year. So in many ways, there are very important and large dollar transfers. There are detailed agreements within this. But for the most part, as you can see, there aren't many changes on kind of the overall agreements in this year's partnership agreement. And in fact, a lot of them are kind of built on a formula basis. So things like the payment in lieu of taxes that the utility company pays to the city annually is based on a multi-year formula that changes based on their sales. There's a rate attached to it, and there's generally very little fluctuations from year to year. So I'm going to just briefly touch on what some of these are. I'm not going to go into the detailed agreements, but I'd be happy to scroll down into those if the council or public, or if the council has any questions on those. So the payment in lieu of taxes I mentioned is kind of a contributions that are made annually based on the sales of the utility company transferred over to the city general fund operations. Street lighting is a shared cost, both from the electric utility and the fact that it's a little bit of a public safety issue. So both the community, the city operations, and the utility participate in both the new lighting as well as the ongoing costs of lighting the community. Fire protection, also a base amount of cost sharing on the city's cost is kind of fixed on the fire protection dollars into the water system for the hydrant system in place. No change on that one. We do also partner where we do not do billing for our wastewater and surface water billing. We contract. That is based on a comprehensive formula that a consultant built based on estimated staff time and fixed cost into the billing system. So improved efficiency and cooperating rather than both of us doing billing on our own, and collections. Professional engineering services from the city side. We provide a number of engineering services for the water system, in particular for the utility company that helps in cooperation in our infrastructure as well as with theirs. So it allows us kind of have efficiency with staffing on our end. With that, it's outlined in that agreement. There's no change. Joint industrial land development. There is land that is owned by the city, Economic Development Authority, and/or City of Marshall. That was shared in the cost of acquiring, marketing, and building out infrastructure for that, and then sold with profits of any land sales shared between the two, with a joint goal to see the community grow and prosper. The utility side benefit is that if they can grow their demand and help see the community grow and be successful, the utility can be healthier and stronger as well. So that's a partnership that's been built for a number of years. We did spend time going through some of the potential development in the Commerce Park area. It's speculative, so we did not include the details of that in the council meeting, but the individual group did go through some of those discussions, as well as give an update on the last industrial park development, the extension of Lake Road into the Sanskar development that included a number of well-publicized expansions that were successful. We do have a couple of pieces of property left out in that land, park that was discussed in detail in that meeting. Capital funding plan basically outlines that we'll work together on our borrowing and do planning. The city council does have to authorize entering into debt. The utility company did indicate an intention to do a refunding this upcoming year. One of the other purposes of cooperating is trying to work with bank qualified status under IRS regulations, that if we stay under a certain dollar threshold, we can both benefit from lower interest rates on our borrowing. We have not sat down for 2016 to go through our list, but it appears in their draft agreement they don't have any plans except for the refunding, which is outside of the debt limits or the bank qualified limits. Fiber optic utilization, we have what's called a dark fiber network, where basically we have connections between our utility companies and the city of Marshall, a number of our facilities. And there's a number of benefits to that, including sharing servers, having redundancy, shared IT staff, and most recently things such as the City Hall, Liquor Store, and Merit Center now are also sharing on their server for telephone systems. So we're able to reduce cost and also end up with a higher quality system by having this interconnected network. We have extremely good reliability of our internet connection and high capacity, and we can only afford to do that by partnering together. So it's a very strong agreement, very smart, and we're benefiting and doing things and implementing new things regularly to maximize that infrastructure cost that the city and utility put in a number of years ago to build out those fiber. And we are also investing in extending those where necessary, such as the Liquor Store and Merit Center were ones this year we completed. Upcoming in this agreement, the modified agreement does contemplate the extension of the fiber network into the new sports center that's being built. There is fiber near the high school because they are also partners in the fiber network. The public school system is part of that as well. So it's a $35,000 capital investment, but it's relatively close for those facilities, and we're looking at utilizing that as well. Information technology sharing primarily relates to some of the detailed IT systems that I mentioned earlier related to some of the capital-related items. The IT basically is for that staff to provide services for the server network maintenance as well as updates to those servers. There's some other software things that we share in costs on, and I believe we have a significant decrease in some of those costs for the upcoming year. A lot of those are very technical in nature, and so we let our IT people kind of sit down with us even outside of this group to explain it, unless you have experts like Mr. DeKramer, who's on our council, who understands a lot of those IT things better than some of us do. And the last one was a relatively new one, I believe. I think that was new in 2014, or the chloride reduction coordination. As the state looks to add new regulations for chloride reductions that could have significant impacts to water softening at the water plant and or on the backside of treatment to do it at the wastewater plant, any investment to deal with chloride will have to be done either on the front end or the back end or a combination of both of those. So basically, we partner together in tracking legislative issues surrounding chloride reduction and to coordinate responses and improvements that we might need to address those. So that's a high-level summary of the agreements and some of the benefits of that. There's a lot of detail that I'd be happy to get into and try and answer some of those. I'll turn it back to the council if there's any questions. Recommend approval.
Thank you, Ben. Councilmember DeKramer and I also were part of the team that sat down with the representatives from the Utilities Commission, so John may be able to address some of those questions too. So we'll open up for any questions.
On the fiber optic one, I think this is on page 25. It talks about the cost of the city being $35,031. That deals with the sports facility, the ice arena. Is that money then going to come out of the sports facility money and fund and not the general fund, or where would that $35,000 come out of?
Thank you, Your Honor. Councilmember Bayer-Kohler, the intent is that it be funded either from the Sports Center, Red Baron Arena and Expo Construction Fund and or the operating fund. They have not specifically put in the budget one or the other, but it would be from the local sales tax dollars and not from property taxes.
Another question I have is, I believe this is on page 31. I noticed that all the items between the city and MMU are the same, except for the Laserfish software support. Is there a reason why there's a difference in that amount versus the other ones? Page 31.
I was having trouble seeing the page numbers on that other.
It's about second
Oh,
from the
you
back.
gotta look up at the top. I'm sorry. Okay, right.
Right there, yeah.
Okay, let me zoom in here. Are we on the top chart or the bottom
It's right
one?
there. It's right there.
6 down on that lower one. 6 or 7 down.
Right there.
On the software
Yeah.
support?
I just
Is it on
curious,
the support
there a
one?
reason- That's not 50/50 or am I missing something?
I believe the software, I believe the reason that's not an equal split, and I'm going to speculate here, is I believe that it's based on user licenses. So if we have more people utilizing the Laserfish, we're going to pay a little bit more. If we have less, I believe that's what it relates to, but I'd probably have to go and do some follow-up to verify that exactly, but I'm speculating that's probably how it relates to.
That's actually a 4-way split too, right? Because the school and Lyon County are also part of that.
Right. Yeah, so maybe that's, yeah, I don't know why ours would be different there than that one.
I think you may be right in it, Ben. I think it's coming from a number of users, actual seats and locations, but I don't know if Glenn, if you have any input on that. I don't think you don't work with it, but I think it goes by number of seats and licenses.
Nope.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions the council has on this? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2015 partnership agreement with Marshall Municipal Utilities.
I move the recommendation to approve the 2016 partnership agreement with Marshall Municipal Utilities.
Motion by Craig, is there a second? Seconded.
I'll second it.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 19. Agenda item number 19 is the 2015 bituminous resurfacing project. We have a change order to consider and then the acknowledgement of the final pay request. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You can see that the change order is fairly significant, and I wanted to touch base on those changes. One being a revision and participation for the repairs, I'll call them, that were done on West Main Street. If you remember, we had some areas that was a rolling condition, and in review with MnDOT, MnDOT recommended, and we also concurred, that those should be repaired. In discussion with the contractor, the areas that must be repaired were those areas that were settlements over the utility trenches. And included in that then is, yes, you could do spot repairs over those utility trenches and then have it look like spot repairs over utility trenches. Or what we decided to do was to take a section of roadway and do a mill and overlay of that section and make it a smoother section. The participation in that was determined both by RNG and the city to be appropriately 50% of those improvements. So of the $13,600 of those repair costs, half of that would be billed back to RNG for their participation of that. We also have about $20,000 that, if you remember, our seal coats and our overlays. Typically, we bid those about the same time, and if we're light on one, we like to spend all of the money that you allocate for us for street improvements for this work. So that's where about $20,000 came from. And the rest of it came from the area on 10th Street next to Sioux Nation, where we did some extension of the project to make that overlay further going south than it was in the original plan. So those are the three major areas for the improvements, and would take any questions that you might have, and we recommend approval of the change order and final contract.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Questions? Not, is there a, I would entertain a motion for change order number, are you recommending this be done in one motion or two motions? So for the change order and the final payment request.
I'll move the change order and the final payment request.
Motion by Larry. Second. Seconded by John. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 20. Agenda item number 20 is Southwest Minnesota Regional Amateur Sports Center. We have a number of change orders to consider, actually 8 change orders. So with that, Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We have separated into both increases and decreases. In this case, they're all increases. And so we'd like to have one motion for the approvals. You can see all the individual change orders, and in the summary of the change orders, we are up to about 1.67% in change order work within the contingencies for the project. The individual change orders have been reviewed by the construction manager and recommended for approval, and therefore I'm recommending approval as well.
Questions?
And I have just more comment than, as I go through these, and a lot of these are change orders because we have changed some things that we wanted done. And on some of these, I think it's just an oversight on ATS&R that it's things they missed that I thought should have been in there. And, I have a hard time accepting some of those, and, because we had to do something, then they backtrack it here and there, and I just think there's a lot of things that I'm not very happy with them as an advisory committee. And when it comes time to settle with them, I think we need to address some of those issues. And I'm not saying that I'm opposed to any of these because as I went through them, I think in general they make sense to me, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Larry. David?
Can I ask a question, Glenn? Maybe this is the wrong question, but we've had an enormous number of change orders. Routinely in our council meetings, we're having 6, 7, 8 change orders for this project. Yeah, it's a big project. Yes, it's a very complex project. It's 30 different contractors. How much of this, that said, we've had other projects of substantial size, substantial dollar value with a fraction of the change orders. How much of this volume is a function of having those 30 different contracts, or might there be other factors at play that are unusual here?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It's all of those reasons. It's number one that there are 30-some individual contracts that each of the contracts has to have their individual change orders. The other part of it is, yes, there may be a separation of types of change orders, whether they're design change orders or design changes change orders. So you have that combination that makes a significant number of change orders, where if this was a general contract, you would have one change order per meeting, let's say, with all of the changes included as defined by what the work was done. So the biggest issue here with number of change orders is number of individual contracts.
Glenn, one last question, and this, you can speculate a little bit on this, but with the total project, what percent complete we are?
No, I was just thinking of that, and I was thinking about 50%, but if you go to the total contract amounts and our schedule, I could probably, what I'd like to do is get you at the end of the outside projects work. Okay, that's the building structure, the foundations, the work that's been done in the parking lots, all of that sort of thing. For probably our next meeting, maybe I'll have that number of where we're at in total percent, because I know we have that. Ben, do you recall? No, but I'm just thinking probably 50% is about complete.
Yeah, and perhaps not the next meeting, but maybe one of, a lighter
Before the
meeting
first
in
of the year.
first part of January. Maybe we'll have the ATS&R and maybe the construction manager.
I sure can.
Sure. Okay, any other questions?
I have a couple questions for you, Glenn. I thought you were saying that if we had a general contractor, there wouldn't be as many of these change orders, that it would, because you're dealing with one contractor.
Mm-hmm.
But in the list here, we have a subcontractor or contractor, Superior Tile and Terrasso, whatever. There's two change orders, even though it's the same contractor.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
just because there's one contractor doesn't mean there's one change order. There's two change orders.
That's right.
So you still get, even if you had one major contractor, you'd still have a lot of change orders.
Yes.
Okay. The other question I have with regard to this is, so of these change orders, how many of them has the work already been done, or for all of them, is the work still to be done?
The answer is both. Sometimes a change order is necessary to keep the project flowing, and relying on the construction manager to make sure that that keeps flowing and processing the change orders and the work. Okay, in the other cases, some of those are in advance. So for instance, tile installations. You want to decide on a tile installation before you order the tile. So in the case of the one where you see a couple of them, we get those change orders on an ongoing basis. So we might have a change order 2 weeks ago that you haven't seen yet, but the contractor has already processed it and got the approvals for your approval, even though they haven't ordered the materials yet. Okay, so, and then 2 weeks later, we might get another change order from the tile company for a different room, for a different color, for a different activity completely, that aren't, we don't wait for the end of the period to process the change order. So that's why you'll get multiple for the same contractor.
So if the work's already been done and we don't
Some.
approve it, who pays for it?
That would, we would get Dennis involved with that one then.
But I'd also add, Glenn, that we appreciate all the time and effort that you put in reviewing each and every one of these, not only the changes, but also the status of the project. So,
Thank you.
Craig?
Just a question on these two as I look at it. How many of these are changes out of necessity, and how much of it is enhancements that we've decided because we're this far, we're going to do this?
I don't have that listing. I don't know of these, but they're easily found. I
Sure.
can go back into them and
Well, and I
identify
kind
them.
of looked at it and I thought about it earlier, and if I had real indigestion about it, I'd have called you before the meeting tonight and asked about it. But, I just look at that, and that's one of the things that I think about, is that we kind of get into a little bit mesmerized sometimes about the newness and the excitement of it, and I just want to make sure that we're focusing on the have-to-haves and not the nice-to-haves necessarily, because we're starting to get up pretty good on the over budget on this, and it makes me a little bit nervous.
Many of the nice-to-haves are being funded by other sources. And maybe that would be appropriate at some future date that we identify that. We do have a large spreadsheet that shows that separation
Perfect.
of being funded by other sources other than the tax money.
Sure, okay, I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, you have the recommendation for the change orders. What's the wishes of the council?
I move the change orders as recommended.
I'll second that.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? Now we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 21. And item number 21, we have a change order to consider with the Merit Center addition. Ben?
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the council. This was a staff-initiated change to the contract. Basically, we had the contractor out on site. We needed to have a shed built. It was planned. And so since they were out there, we asked that they just do it within their contract. This is the Merit Center. This is before the expansion occurred. So basically, in the back area here, there's a small, well, I guess it's a fairly large shed, 20 by 12 shed, double wide door entry that is part of our lease agreement now with Minnesota West, that will be providing storage for that. We've been trying to, we needed a little extra space out at the facility for miscellaneous things. Might be some general storage of equipment, traffic cones, etc. Might also be things like temporary storage of pallets that they might burn for a fire training purpose. That's going to be stored in that facility, and that's worked into that agreement. So the total cost of the shed was $8,763.36, and the detailed change order is included. This one is funded from actually from the operating fund of the Merit Center. Open up to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ben. Questions?
What's going to be stored in the shed?
Well, it will be Minwest storage, but the types of things like I know they've had an issue with like pallets, finding a place. We don't want them just sitting out and looking kind of junky around the site. So temporary wood pallets or traffic cones maybe for training, or basically anything that could be cold storage, moving where they had been storing some things like in the fire training facility at the base of it, which can be an obstacle when we're doing the training in there and have to move it out. So that all of that's going to be moved out. Some of it will go in there, and some will go in their storage up above, and some of it disposed. So miscellaneous things for Minnesota West, basically.
In our new facility, there's not enough storage space.
Well, there's not enough that we decided that we wanted this extra temporary storage for the outside. So yes, we would like more storage exterior than just is available in the interior.
And I would say some of that storage you really don't want to move inside, like you were talking about old pallets, bales of hay, things like that that you really don't want to put into the building. So you want that in a garage basically type building on the outside. So it's a number of things like that it doesn't look nice sitting outside, and it sure doesn't look nice sitting inside the building. So
When it's consumable fuels mostly, so you don't want it wet. You got to have it somewhat controlled, but you certainly don't want to be dragging it inside the building and creating a housekeeping problem.
And this is the building that was constructed on the concrete panel that was provided by the concrete. They delivered it. It was marked wrong. So
made wrong.
David?
Question perhaps for Glenn, how did they miss this when they're developing the proposal for the project? It took a long time to figure out what their needs on the site would be, space utilization. They've been using these things already for years, storing them outside. Why didn't it occur to somebody in that design process to add this to the package at the time?
And Mayor and Council, I don't think it would have made a difference. I don't think we would want to added it to the Merit Center training site or facility. I guess it was more of an afterthought.
Actually, I think, the real heart of it is that there was never really sure how much money we were going to end up with getting through the whole process. The main purpose was getting the track and the building up. And as we're looking at, you see in here, this is covered by the contingency funds that, it's basically, we're nearing the end of the project. Yes, these are some things we want to have. It's kind of back to your what do we need and what do we want to have. We've got some room left in the contingency funds to take care of something like this, just to, again, keep the place cleaned up and do that. So it's not really as much as something that was missed as something that was not a requirement as such in the very beginning, that it wasn't part of the need to have, it was part of the want to have.
Okay,
Yeah, and
any
I
other
did
questions?
misspeak, I misspoke earlier when I said this was coming from the operating fund. This one is coming from the project contingencies, which there's dollars there. I was mixing that up. We were doing some carpet replacement on some of the existing rooms. That's where it's getting expensed to the operating fund.
Any other questions?
So that, okay, I just make sure I caught so this is not, this is not coming from merit fund money?
It is, the way that it's written in here is accurate. It is coming from the merit construction fund for the building expansion. So it's
Not the
within the
operating.
contingency, right?
Okay.
Not in the operating fund of it.
But, and if I'm hearing this correctly, though, if we didn't have the money, we'd be storing it someplace else, but because we have excess money, then we'll build this new shed. So it wasn't important enough to have in the original project, but now since we have additional money, we're going to spend it for this. That is,
That would be one way of putting it. Yep.
Yeah, and you don't want to, you don't want, if there's soil corrections that surprise you when you're doing the project, you don't want to use up all your contingency. This is one of those you said, okay, well, we got past all of that. We're in good enough shape. We can choose to do this.
so this was not a high priority item.
Not high enough to reach the original budget scope, right?
I'll move the recommendation.
Motion by Larry, is there a second?
Second.
Second by John, discussion? Not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 22. Agenda item number 22, consider the approval of the personnel policy amendments. With us today is Sheila Dubs from Human Resources, City Marshall. You're going to make this presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. We are proposing 2 revisions to the Personnel Policy Manual at this time. One of those is the holiday pay policy, and the other one is to the severance pay benefit. I'll start with the holiday pay policy first. Again, these policies apply to non-union employees. Both of these provisions are listed in contract language, so we are not talking about union employees at this time with these 2. With advance approval, we do have employees that could be scheduled to work on a holiday, and currently, when they do that, they can select a different date to substitute as their holiday within 30 days. This does result in some additional tracking by supervisors and our payroll person. Some employees forget or simply don't take the holiday within the 30-day time limit, in which case they're paid for the holiday on the next paycheck. After 30 days, then they would just have the 88 hours of regular pay at 2 weeks. The amendment would eliminate the necessity for all the additional tracking from both our payroll person and the supervisor. It would also ensure that all of our employees are compensated properly in the same pay period that the holiday occurs in. The amendment is also written to disallow employees from banking holiday hours as compensatory time. We don't have a lot of that going on today, but we'd just like to disallow that from occurring in the future. The other amendment that we are seeking at this time is to discontinue the severance pay benefit to employees hired after January 1st of 2016. If approved, none of our current employees would be harmed by this change. The recommendation is coming after I did a review of benefits probably about 9 months ago, and our city's severance pay benefit, that is where we provide a percentage of salary after 20 years of employment where an employee retires. That particular benefit was identified as a benefit that's no longer offered by our comparable cities. All of our other benefits, as we've previously discussed, are in line, but this particular one I didn't see with any of our other comparators. Additionally, based on some of the recent research that has come out, we're not believing that this is a benefit that millennial employees will be valuing, as they're not likely going to be staying with the same employer 20 years or more. So, as previously mentioned, approving this with an effective date of January 1st would bring no harm to any of our existing employees.
Thank you, Sheila. Questions?
I just want to thank you for taking the initiative to check on what comparable cities are doing and bringing this to our attention. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, you have the recommendation. I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the amendments to the personnel policy as presented.
Motion by Craig, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. At this time, I'll call for a 5-minute recess. Okay, we'll reconvene. We're on agenda item number 23. Agenda item number 23 is a resolution that would amend the general obligation bond 2013A post-sale tax levies for the airport portion and authorizing the use of tax increments. And you provided the explanation on this in your memo, and also noted that this is a kind of an administrative cleanup housekeeping item.
Yeah, this is, I'm sorry, excuse me. Thank you, Your Honor, members of the City Council. These are air park related development improvements from the 2013A bond, and I'll just pull up, this kind of is a debt schedule that we have, which was included in the documents. So you'll notice the reference in this column to levy, which would mean the property tax levy on a debt service. So typically, these are the schedules that our finance department follows then when setting the upcoming year's debt service levy. So for these, we actually did levy these first 2 years payments. So the one's kind of in the current year that we have in there, and then the other was a prior year. But when we did these actual improvements, we did intend and did discuss that the local matching funds that would be leveraging the aviation grants that we got for the project were intended to come from the tax increment financing pooled funds that we had. In fact, we amended our TIF district to actually incorporate that where it wasn't previous. That was done prior to the project starting. In discussing it with our financial consultants at the time, they recommended or indicated that internally you can choose, because it's a GO bond, meaning it's pledged by the taxpayers of the city, the bondholders need to be able to see that the fact that this is pledged, so they like to see the language in there showing the levy amount. However, for internal purposes, we can choose to fund it from other sources of funding if we want to. So if we have, funds like tax increment financing funds, we could cover these levy amounts with TIF dollars rather than the levy amounts. So basically what we're doing, so that was the intent, but we did follow these schedules initially. So we're trying to basically make up for the amounts that were done previously with the pooled TIF and then set the course into the future kind of with a more formal internal document. So it's staff changes or just, as you forget kind of year to year when the finance department's getting geared up for we wanted to have an internal document that showed that. So this Exhibit B on the resolution identifies basically that the dollar amounts that we had previously already kind of planned from last year and this year from tax levy would be, there would be a transfer into this fund from our TIF funds, and then into the future, we're projecting at this time that there will be adequate funds there, but we would have pooled TIFs used to pay for that. If in the event the dollars weren't there to do that, then levy would have to make up the difference, or another source of funds that you might have available at the city's discretion to cover those costs, but ultimately they're an obligation. So that's one of the main action items of the resolution. With that, the dollars that's outlined in the resolution, the dollars that were levied here will actually stay within that same bond issue. So they'll be utilized for expenses within that that bond issue that were non-airport related. So we do have levy purposes that it will go to those expenses directly within that fund as well. So basically we would have other taxes to cover expenses related to that, so it'll stay right in the fund. The other items that the resolution does in addition to that would be to, so I covered A and B of the now therefore be resolved. The other item is there are two other capital projects, not the bond or debt repayment side, but still we do have active capital projects that you might notice, like when we do the audit, that we had a shortfall on Madrid Street Bridge Fund project, as well as the all other improvements, which is infrastructure, water, sewer lines and things. We had a deficit in those two, which we're using those pooled increments to balance that out, and basically then we'll be able to close those projects and move on for those. So the 256,000 goes to the bridge project, and the rest goes to the all other improvements. Those were also intended. Don't have the full source and uses from the aviation funds for you tonight, but basically this resolution tries to clarify this. It's all internal things. We don't need to get any kind of bond approval or anything. So this is just more to have good documentation internally. Council directing these actions to occur with accounting adjustments that will be occurring, so we don't have to do them later in the year. So this will be authorizing all of those things to occur. This was amended from what I had posted later last evening, but any of the adjustments were really just clarifying the fund number. Substantively, it didn't change anything. It just we just did a little bit of a cleanup. So certainly can try and answer any questions to better explain this, but staff's recommendation is approval on really kind of an administrative item, but a very important administrative item with some big impacts that as we kind of look to get late in the year with our budget, it's good to have this completed to kind of clean up a number of items on the books.
Thank you, Ben. Questions? If not, is there a motion for the resolution? I'm making this general amendment. Motion by Elaine, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 24. Agenda item number 24, consider the application for exempt permit for Southwest Minnesota State University Foundation for an event January 29, 2016. Any questions about this? If not, is there a motion? Motion by John, is there a second? Seconded by Larry. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note the abstention. Agenda item number 25. Consider the adoption of the resolution approving the reappointment of a commissioner to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Ben or Dennis?
Your Honor, members of the City Council, looks like Tom put this one together, and I'm guessing our HRA serves as the active City Council members, so if you were to happen to not continue your term, we'd refill that with a new member. So we do still stagger it, since you wouldn't have to follow the City Council appointments. So Councilmember DeCramer is scheduled for reappointment to keep him as an active member. Anything to add, Tom? Okay, recommend approval with the abstention of our one council member.
I believe I'll abstain too.
Oh, and I'm sorry, and Mayor
We're going
Burns.
to include you in this too?
Mayor Burns also is included in there. Sorry.
Move the recommendation.
Motion by Larry.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll note 2 abstentions. Agenda item number 26, Board Commission Liaison Reports. The Regional Development Commission had their regular meeting, a couple weeks ago, or not this past week, but the week before. Normal routine business. One of the things that the RDC is preparing for is that the Area Agency on Aging, which occupies about 45% of the facility there, will be relocating, and so they won't be a tenant anymore of the RDC, so that opens up some available office space in that facility. Also, I serve as the Regional Development Commission on the District 8 Area Transportation Partnership. They met this past Friday. Actually, Glenn was there also. Updating on a number of the transportation projects, but one to note is that the passing lane projects, which was a corridor of commerce project on Highway 23, there's there's actually 5 passing lanes that were authorized, 2 and I'll say maybe 2.5 because that one's split, are kind of under the final review and set to be bid. Those are the ones that are, I'll say, north of Granite Falls, between Granite Falls and Wilmer. And then there's 3 that are south of Marshall, between Marshall and Jasper. And those have been let, so they will be under construction. I believe the contractor is CSI paving contractor with a sub of R&G, and that construction will start right away this spring. So with that, Craig?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the library board, the budget committee met yesterday, and so we're moving forward based on the kind of the hint from the city on, where we think the budget may be, and also a pretty solid nod from the county. So moving forward with that, as you saw the invites that were left on the at our stations tonight, they'll be doing candidate interviews on December 7th, and I'd really encourage everyone that can be there, especially for this breakfast, to take part in it. I think we had 3. We're going to interview 2. There was a conflict with getting the 3rd one here, but looking at the resumes and the backgrounds, I think we've got some pretty good candidates. So I want to thank Sheila. Sheila's done a lot of work kind of helping us through this, and there's more to come. We're kind of working through some contract stuff now too to get some draft things ready. So that is moving forward, and our hope is to have the candidate on board by the end of the year. So we're doing pretty good.
Thank you, Craig.
I did not meet I missed the Marshall Area Transit Committee meeting last week. I had a conflict, so I did not attend that.
Okay. Larry?
I entered comments and forgot to save them, so I have to do this from memory. EDA board met last week. The project at Parkway 2 is underway. Walls should be going up, I do believe, starting Monday, the basement and so forth, but board. We have a hiree for the EDA position with their attachment with Tracy. She'll be working 4 days a week in Tracy and 1 day a week in Marshall. And for the first time, we showed income in itself with our Parkway 2 edition. We put $50,000 in checking last month. That's all I can remember.
Lynn?
No report.
John?
MMU did have their meeting, and also we had the partnership agreement, which we acted on tonight. MMU basically finished their budget up at the meeting, and they're scheduled to be approved in the December meeting. They are, by the way, moving their meetings up from 5:30 and moving them up to 4:30 to just hopefully to complete things a little bit quicker. As we talked about earlier too, they do have an intent, and they're starting formal proceedings to look at refunding a bond or basically refinancing to save some significant dollars there. Coming up in the near future, I think was that scheduled for 8th that we're doing a workshop, or what? Or we're going to have a workshop anyway. That's Brad Rose from the utilities will be talking about the S1 contract that we have with Missouri River. There is an effort underway to a resolution for an amendment to that contract. I listened in on a webinar, and I know Dennis as well sat in with a number of other commissioners at the presentation, and it's rather intense to discuss and go through, but essentially Missouri River is asking for some changes to the contract and an extension, and we'll get the full details through the workshop and the reasonings why and everything else out of there. That's coming up in a near future workshop session. So
I believe that's January 12th, the first meeting in January for the work session,
okay.
and then the approval on the 26th of January.
Yeah, there's a series of progressions that everyone needs to go through to ratify this amendment, so there's time in there. The target is to have everything complete with all the members by March 1st, so. And let's see, I think Larry did a good job of remembering everything on EDA, so.
David?
None of my boards have met. The Airport Commission comes up next Tuesday.
And Elaine?
The Community Service Board will meet next week, and we haven't met with the Adult Community Center. But I did want to mention that we had a very successful meeting with the public last Tuesday on the Act for Alzheimer's, and we had 176 people sign up and come to that presentation, which was presented by a woman from Montana who is nationally known for her work on Alzheimer's, and she had several books there for purchase and so on. But it was really gratifying to see that many people show up. We have some of our other meetings, especially where we were trying to get the public to come, and especially business people and so on to come. The attendees have been rather low.
Thank you for your work and your leadership on that, Elaine. We'll move on then to agenda item number 27. Agenda item number 27, council member individual items. Greg?
None.
Larry?
I have none.
I have none.
Elaine?
Actually, I just wanted to mention that a citizen from our community came up to me one day, and he commented how wonderful Marshall is right now, and all the growth and not only economic but cultural growth. But then he said, you know, you've got to remember also that you should not be raising taxes for the community members. So he said it was very important that we really keep that under control. And I said, well, with the growth that we have, that means that we're going to be bringing in more taxes from those businesses and those individuals. But he was concerned for those of us that have lived here for many years. So, anyway.
David?
No, nothing.
The only thing I would add is that the Senate, Minnesota Senate Capital Investment Committee did have a hearing in Marshall this past week, and I, along with Ben and members of the Merit, representatives of the Merit Committee, and Chief Rob Yant did provide the testimony and the explanation of the request for the state bonding dollars that we've talked about here also for the next phase of the driving track. So the $2.9 million is the request. It was well received, and one of the reasons it was well received is not only because of the project, but really because it's a one-to-one match with local funds, which was the only one that was discussed at that meeting. That was a one-to-one or something. Didn't have any match. So that bill that was actually introduced at the first year of the biennial session, so it's an active bill. So it is introduced. It's under consideration. Ben, anything you want to add there?
Nope, I would concur. Thank you, Mayor. And the council did pass their resolution of support back in 2014, and because it became an active bill and carried over, didn't see the need to bring it back again because the council had already acted on it.
When you say a one-to-one match, could you explain that?
The investment that is already there, that would be local investment through the local office.
So it's not new investment, it's past investments?
That's correct. Yeah. Including.
And that
price of the
excites
land.
them, or that
Yeah.
we've already spent it? It's not like we're coming up with new money.
It's already.
Mr. Mayor, the dollars would be new dollars based on the proposal request. So we need to spend a little more time analyzing the sales tax analysis to determine the financing of that. But kind of focused on the current projects and getting those done, I guess, at hand, and then taking a look at that shortly after. So, yeah.
Following up on that,
It would, the
you
local
talk-
match would be new dollars. It would be an obligation of the city, and we would have to come up with a funding plan related to that. There'd be opportunity in the future to say yay or nay or to that, but as of now, that's the request. Would have new dollars.
but the city itself is not committing additional dollars of our own. We're talking about the food and beverage tax. Is that the money you're talking about, or?
Yes, yeah, so that would be one of the likely funding sources of that, depending on the growth of the dollars and
Right.
funds available with that.
But the food and beverage money is already committed to fund operations of the facility.
It is obligated to fund operations. There is the opportunity, if so chose, to allocate capital improvements as well from those dollars. We're going to have to take a close look at the projections and costs before we jump into the additional improvements to the track, but that's the contemplation of it.
So we're saying that the food and beverage tax has more revenues, and then we're paying higher taxes in those areas beyond what we need to operate the facility. It's like we're going to generate additional money to expand the facility. Instead of paying down the debt, we will spend more money on a new facility.
That's an option to do that.
But that's what we'd be committing to if we go through with this.
Correct, if you committed to it.
Right.
Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item number 28. Number 28, staff report, Ben.
Hey, Your Honor, members of the City Council, just a few brief updates. The liquor store project's going well with our opening, so hopefully the little kinks that you have behind the scenes, hopefully our customers don't see that. So there are little things, like I said the last time, that we're still working on or continuing to work out on the store, but overall I think we're getting positive feedback, and our staff certainly should be recognized for the hard work they put in. It's not easy making a move, and I know there's vehicles there on Sundays and weekends and things too when we're not even open on Sundays. They're there doing work to get things transitioned. I know Public Works has helped out both at the Merit Center and liquor store, so we appreciate the inter-department cooperation going on. And I heard they just asked them, Glenn, that when it snows they expect it to be reciprocal on the time that they put in out at the liquor store, but I'm not sure we're qualified for that, the liquor store people, but continuing to look at kind of wrapping that project up and getting things going. We have seen.
I should interrupt there, Ben, and I meant to also acknowledge, that project, great comments on it. Looks great. You put in a lot of time, so thanks.
There's a lot of details that go into, especially like on something like that where you want the design, a lot of details that go into that, and still some more to be completed. But sales are up. Of course, we're kind of in the holidays, so our staff's kind of looking at the sales maybe on kind of what a typical Friday, Saturday, but we are moving into the holidays, our higher levels. So we haven't had time to really do some comparative stuff, but probably after the first of the year, we'll do a little bit of a look back. I'm not sure I'll look back. I won't probably dwell too much on it here, day to day, but I think we definitely are seeing, a lot of people are just there to look around, and I think also there's just more people spending more time in there as well. So hopefully that continue to see positive things with that. The Merit Center project is wrapping up too. We've got temporary occupancy. Would expect permanent occupancy is probably not too far away. Gearing up for funding reimbursements with the state on the process of all of that, the paperwork. So that's a high priority item to get going on that issue. Ethanol burn prop, we do have some carryover projects still from a previous bonding related to the wind tower that's been completed for some time, as well as the ethanol prop should be coming in early December, hopefully from I forget the name of the company now, Bar Piping, is that it, or Bar? Anyway, I'm going to forget the name of the company, but our fire chief's been helping with that issue. We are looking kind of one item on the, I'm not sure, I need to follow up to make sure there's been a contact gone out on it, but we are going to be asking for an L&O meeting. I know one of the things we're lking at is a discussion, the mayor's mentioned it, on the wage issue on the MMU members, because we would like to have an introduction of an ordinance at the next regular council meeting, if we can. So we're going to be trying to get that group together, at least for that. I can't remember if there's anything else on the list. Other than that, we're going to have some budget items at the meeting afterwards. Open it up to any questions you might have.
Questions? If not, Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Dennis, if you would hand that out. We are planning on reopening Saratoga Street and the pedestrian overpass on Monday, the 30th of the month, pending progresses that we expect to have. This will be the press release that goes out. We'll send it to all of those distribution entities on the upper left-hand corner. In addition, this is your notice, and we'll be putting it on our website and Twitter and Facebook and all those kinds of things. We do that through community services. One thing we want to reiterate, there was some concern that the seeding that we're doing currently with the hydromulching was actually the finished product, and it's not. This is just temporary hydromulching for our erosion protection for winter. In the springtime, we'll come back and redo the soil that's there and seed it properly and hydromulch it then. So that was a comment that we received today. There's some rocks still remaining on the boulevards and big clumps of dirt and things like that, but this is just to protect it over the winter. We've had the opportunity to do additional construction work late in the fall because of our lack of the snow that others have gotten, and we're also now gearing up for 2016 projects. Our survey crews are out doing work for those as well. If you have any questions, I'd certainly take them.
Questions for Glenn? Not, we'll move to Dennis.
I didn't see my name on the agenda. I was trying to move quickly through it here. Just a few updates. Working on the mall redevelopment project has resurfaced again. We're amending some of the documents. The construction did not get started as soon as we had anticipated, so we are reviewing those documents. There will be a number of items coming back to council on December 8th. Marshall Hotel condemnation matter, we have another hearing coming up on that on December 16th. And I spoke to Avera Hospital today. We will soon be closing on the sale of that small piece of property that the city acquired from MnDOT, so that will be used to expand the Avera parking lot there. As Councilmember DeCramer indicated, MMU and the S1 power agreement will be brought forward here to council. And then also working with Ben and trying to develop a request for proposals for vendor agreements to provide vendors out at the Red Baron Expo Arena area. So a number of contract reviews going on.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. We'll move on then to agenda item number 30. Agenda item number 30 is the pending agenda items. Any comments or questions? If not, we'll move to agenda item number 31. The information items, including the building permits. Agenda item number 32 would be consideration to go into closed session related to union contracts and closed session related to the establishment of pricing of property. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So move.
Motion by Craig, seconded by David to go into closed session. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. 35, consider adjourning this meeting. Motion by David, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig to adjourn. Discussion, now move to vote. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.